My wife started cheating, and it led me down a rabbit hole I never could have imagined. I used to think feminists were fighting the good fight. I admired them, supported them, and considered myself an ally. I guess you could say I loved feminists in a way. That was until I married one, or rather, until my wife became one. For a long time, everything between Kayla and me was perfect. The kind of perfect you see in movies and think, no way, that's not real. We were real. We had two beautiful kids, a house I worked my tail off for, and a love that felt unshakable. But a foundation, no matter how strong, can still crack when an earthquake hits. For us, the earthquake was a handful of women, a feminist social circle she fell into. It started subtly. Kayla, my warm, loving Kayla, began to change. At first, it was just talk. She'd come home from her meetups buzzing with new ideas, new jargon. Words like patriarchy and systemic oppression started peppering our dinner conversations. I tried to be supportive, to listen, but it was like she was speaking a different language. A language where I was suddenly the enemy. These women she was spending time with, they weren't just opinionated, they were perpetually aggrieved. Nothing could ever be right. If I held a door for one of them when they came over, I was sending the message that I thought all women were helpless children. If I didn't hold the door, I was a disrespectful, entitled pig. Walk behind them on the street? I'm a creep. Walk ahead? I'm an egotistical monster leading the way. There was no winning. It was a game rigged from the start, and I didn't even know I was playing. I told myself it was a phase. I trusted my wife. I thought she was too smart, too grounded, to get sucked into that kind of circular, angry logic. But I was wrong. She didn't just follow the herd. She started leading the charge. And in the process, she torched not just her own life, but our marriage, our family, and any semblance of the future we had planned together. It all began with small things, little arguments that felt big at the time, but were nothing compared to what was coming. I come home after a 14-hour shift, exhausted down to my bones, and leave my dinner plate in the sink. The next morning, it wasn't just a dirty dish. It was a symbol of my male privilege, my contribution to the centuries of female subjugation. My single plate was somehow responsible for every abuser who ever walked free. It felt insane. I remember one evening, I sat down with our son, Milo, to help him with his math homework. He was struggling with fractions, and I was trying to explain it with slices of pizza, the way my dad had taught me. Kayla walked in, watched for a moment with her arms crossed, and then pulled me into the kitchen. "You're being inherently problematic," she whispered, her voice sharp. "Your mansplaining is just proving the point." I just stared at her, completely baffled. Mansplaining? I was teaching my 7-year-old son how to divide a pie. The woman I married, the one who used to laugh at my stupid jokes and hold my hand in the car, was vanishing. It was like watching a photograph fade in the sun, the colors bleaching out until only a cold, gray outline remained. In her place was this stranger, someone cold, antagonistic, and utterly convinced of her own righteousness. Then came the moment that turned my simmering unease into a cold, hard knot of fear in my gut. I was playing a video game with Milo, a stupid little racing game. He finally beat my high score, and I turned to him, grinning, to give him a high five. As my hand came up, he flinched. Not a small, shy movement. A real, genuine flinch, his shoulders hunching up to his ears, his eyes wide with fear. My stomach dropped through the floor. It was a physical reaction, like being punched in the solar plexus. I froze, my hand hovering in the air. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I tried to talk to Kayla about it. I was gentle, careful with my words. "Hey, I noticed something strange with Milo today. He flinched when I went to high-five him. Have you noticed him being jumpy?" She didn't even look up from her book. "That's just your fragile male ego talking," she said, her tone dismissive. I pressed, telling her it worried me, that it wasn't normal. She finally closed the book with a sigh. "You're not seeing what you think you're seeing," she explained, as if to a child. "You're lying to yourself because you need to feel stronger and more powerful than me." It's a classic insecurity response. It was so confusing, such a masterclass in psychological jujitsu, that I almost believed her. But the image of my son's scared face was burned into my mind. That wasn't my ego. That was my heart breaking. From that day on, I watched them like a hawk. My daughter, Briar, and my son, Milo. I saw them slowly dimming, their bright, energetic little spirits becoming more timid, more withdrawn. They started talking in whispers. Milo started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done in years. My focus shifted. The state of my marriage, which had been my primary concern, suddenly felt secondary. The only thing that mattered was figuring out what was happening to my children. The answer arrived one Tuesday afternoon. I got off work a few hours early and pulled into our driveway to see an unfamiliar car parked there. A nice car, a newer model sedan I'd never seen before. My first thought, the one that hit me with the force of a physical blow, was cheating. My heart shattered into a million pieces right there in the driver's seat of my truck. But instead of storming in, instead of confronting her, I just put the truck in reverse and drove away. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up at a cheap diner a few towns over, staring into a cup of coffee that went cold, my mind a chaotic storm of betrayal and fear. I drove around for a few hours, letting the anger and the pain wash over me until I was just numb. When I got back home, the car was gone. I walked in and found Kayla in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner, as if it were just another Tuesday. I kept my voice level. Whose car was that in the driveway earlier? She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that was just a friend, she said, waving the knife dismissively. Am I not allowed to have a life outside of this miserable house? The venom in her voice was startling. Miserable house? This was our home. This was the place we had built together. In that instant, it became terrifyingly clear. She didn't give a damn about our family anymore. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. Maybe she never had been. My kids were turning from timid into actively fearful. That was it. That was the line. She had crossed it. I decided right then and there to do something I never thought I'd be capable of. I was going to take away one of her fundamental human rights, the right to privacy. That night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. Most of the recent messages were deleted, wiped clean. But she'd missed a thread. A conversation with one of her new friends. They were discussing strategy. How Kayla should approach me about opening our marriage. Ease into it, the friend advised. Make him think it's his idea, too. Make it about his freedom. It was clinical, manipulative, and chilling. So, she was cheating. I almost laughed. It was so much worse than that. But the cheating was the proof I could see, the thing I could hold on to. The open relationship was just her attempt to get a free pass. But I didn't care about her affairs anymore. I cared about who was in my house, who was making my children so scared they flinched at their own father. My mind started racing, formulating a plan. I needed full custody. No questions, no arguments. To do that, I needed undeniable proof. And since we had no prenup, I also had to make sure I wasn't left financially ruined, unable to provide for my kids. I had to play this smart. I had to become as cold and calculating as she was. A few days later, she did it. She brought it up over breakfast. It was a Saturday morning. The kids were watching cartoons in the living room. She was stirring her oatmeal, so nonchalantly it was almost theatrical. So, she began, I was reading about these couples who have open relationships. What do you think about that concept? I was ready. I had my phone in my shirt pocket, recording. I didn't yell. I didn't scream or throw things. I just looked her straight in the eye, my jaw so tight I could feel my teeth grinding together, and asked one simple question. Who is he? Her entire demeanor crumbled. The cocky, intellectual mask slid right off her face, revealing the panicked, guilty person underneath. What? What do you mean? She stammered, her spoon clattering against the bowl. But I just kept staring, silent. I wasn't falling for her innocent act anymore. The truth came out, not in a flood, but in a series of reluctant, ugly trickles. She confessed to 2 one-night stands, both with married men she'd met through her group. Men with children of their own. She told me when they came over, she would lock our kids in their room, forcing them to sleep on the hardwood floor so they wouldn't interrupt. She and her partners would be in our bedroom, loud enough for our children to hear everything. That was it. That was the source of their terror. My mind reeled, picturing my son and daughter huddled together on the floor, listening to those sounds, not understanding, but knowing it was something wrong, something scary. The timidness, the bedwetting, the flinching, it all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening snap. But she wasn't done. The bombshell was yet to come. She was planning to sleep with a colleague from her part-time job. She wasn't asking for permission. She was informing me of her intentions. It's good for me, she said, a defiant glint in her eye. And you don't have any right to control me. The way she said it, with such righteous indignation instead of a shred of remorse, made it clear this wasn't a confession. It was a declaration of independence from our marriage, from me, from our family. It was a mission statement. Then, as if the situation wasn't absurd enough, she tried to soften the blow with the most insulting offer I could possibly imagine. I was thinking, she said, a strange, almost pitying smile on her face. I could set you up with one of my friends. Sarah. She's really keen on you. She thinks you're hot. Sarah. I had met Sarah, a perpetually angry, loud woman who seemed to find fault in everything and everyone. The thought of her touching me was physically repulsive. I wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole held by someone else. Offering me her angry friend as a consolation prize for her infidelity was a level of disrespect so profound it almost circled back around to being funny. Almost. My head was spinning, a nauseating cocktail of rage, grief, and disbelief. But through the fog, a single, clear thought emerged. I need more evidence. I maintained just enough composure to ask for her phone. Let me see it, I said, my voice dangerously calm. To my surprise, she complied. I think she thought I wanted to see the messages to gauge the damage, to see if we could fix it. As she headed to the bathroom, she unlocked it for me, showing me the pattern. The second she closed the bathroom door, I bolted into my home office and locked the door behind me. She started pounding on it, screaming, but I ignored her. I plugged the phone into my computer and ran a data recovery software I had downloaded the night before. It all came spilling out. Deleted texts, photos, explicit conversations, plans for meetups, and worst of all, disparaging comments about me, about our life, about our marriage. She and her friends talked about me like I was a joke, an obstacle, a walking wallet. Before I was done, I installed a monitoring app, a ghost program that would feed me everything she did from that point on. I walked out of the office, handed her the phone, and said, "Get out." Her response wasn't remorse. It wasn't sadness. It was pure indignation. "You're so controlling," she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "You're holding me back, just like men have always held women back throughout history. You never truly loved me. You just wanted to possess me." She went on, a tirade of buzzwords and accusations she'd learned from her new friends. She had every right to do this, she claimed, and I was expected to just accept it as the new normal for our marriage. Through her entire speech, I said nothing. I just walked into our bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started silently packing her things. I threw her clothes, her books, her makeup into the bag, and zipped it up. I carried it to the front door and sat on the porch. I stood there, holding the door open, until she finally ran out of steam. As she walked down the stairs, defeated and fuming, I said the last words I intended to say to her as my wife. "You're single now. Do whatever you want. I'm not controlling you anymore. My lawyer will be in touch in January." Before she could reply, I slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so uncontrollably I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. The finality of it washed over me, a tidal wave of cold, terrifying relief. Through the monitoring app, I became a fly on the wall of her new life. I watched her group chat light up as she told her friends everything. They didn't offer sympathy, they offered praise. They called her strong, brave, a warrior for demanding what she deserved. They assured her my divorce threat was just a bluff. "Don't worry," one of them typed. "Men always make threats they can't follow through on. He'll come crawling back once he realizes what he's losing." The thought that chilled me to the bone, though, came from Sarah, the consolation prize. She suggested that if I didn't back down, Kayla could just accuse me of domestic abuse to secure her future. "It's easy," Sarah bragged, and then proceeded to detail exactly how she had destroyed her ex-husband, taking his house, his savings, and his kids with false claims. She gave a step-by-step guide, what to say, how to act, even suggesting Kayla could give herself a few bruises for proof. I felt sick. I immediately went online and ordered a set of security cameras for the inside and outside of my house. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I had to record everything from this point forward. A few hours later, a new message popped up on Kayla's phone. It was from one of her affair partners, one of the married men. She was arranging to meet him at a hotel. The message included the name, the address, and a room number. My mind went into overdrive. I did a quick search online, found the man's wife on Facebook, and sent her a message. I told her everything, including their current location. She thanked me, her reply terse and full of pain, and hung up. Hours later, she sent me a video file. I opened it, and my world tilted on its axis. It was footage from inside the hotel room. The wife was screaming, her voice raw with betrayal. "You piece of trash. You do this to me again? To the kids? I told you we were over if you ever did this again." The camera panned over to the bed, where my wife, Kayla, was scrambling to get dressed. I saw her, and I physically vomited into the kitchen sink. The visual confirmation, the raw, undeniable proof of her betrayal, hit me harder than any text message ever could. The AP's wife slapped Kayla across the face and berated her for being a homewrecker, for helping to destroy yet another family. I sent Kayla a single message. "I've seen the video. Don't ever come near me or the children again." My entire body felt cold, as though I'd been plunged into ice water. The woman in that video was a stranger to me, not just because she was in that compromising situation, but because the person herself was unrecognizable. Her behavior in the following days was bizarre. It was like she thought this was all a game, a competition she was winning. She texted her friends that I was falling apart and would be begging her to come home within a week. She seemed completely disconnected from the reality that our marriage was over, that we were actually getting a divorce. There was no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused, just strategic planning for how to come out ahead. I joined her family's WhatsApp group for a few minutes, long enough to post a single message. "To all of you, I'm sorry to have to say this, but Kayla and I are divorcing due to her infidelity. Thank you for the years you welcomed me into your family." Then I left the group before anyone could reply. My phone immediately blew up with calls and messages from her relatives, but I didn't answer. I couldn't bear to relive the details over and over, each retelling a fresh slice into an open wound. I drove to my parents' house with the kids. After telling my mom and dad everything, my father, a man of few words but firm convictions, sent Kayla a single text. "You are not welcome in our home for Christmas." I was staying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters and trophies from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. My boss was incredible, giving me time off until mid-January, recognizing I was in no state to function. The monitoring app continued to be a source of both horror and validation. Kayla's discussions with her friends grew more and more frantic. I don't think she truly comprehended that she had lost everything: her family, her home, her future. Her new friends weren't friends. They were enablers, offering toxic advice that only pushed her further down the rabbit hole. She sent me countless messages, a mix of threats, pleas, and angry tirades. She even showed up at my parents' house on Christmas Eve, demanding to celebrate with us. My father met her at the door and threatened to call the police if she didn't leave his property, his face flushed with a quiet, protective anger that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. I spent my days Googling divorce lawyers in between crying spells. The initial shock had worn off. The autopilot that got me through the first few days had switched off, and the pain hit me with the force of a freight train. Nothing made sense. How could someone change so drastically, so completely? Was our entire 11-year marriage a lie? Was this darkness always inside her, waiting for the right moment to come out? Or did something or someone fundamentally break her? I only responded to 2 of her dozens of messages. The first: "It doesn't matter what you say. I don't know who you are. You're not my wife. My wife would never destroy my heart and soul while smiling. We will get divorced. I don't care what you want. You have no right to demand anything from me ever again. We are over." The second, a few days later: "Like I said, you're not my wife. I don't know you. My wife would never condemn our children to growing up in a broken home. You, whoever you are, seem proud of what you've done. My wife was loving, caring, considerate. My best friend. You are a self-obsessed, self-absorbed abomination." The messages stopped after that. I think perhaps reality was finally starting to set in. The pain was unbearable. Sometimes I'd find myself just staring at old family photos, tracing the outline of her smiling face with my finger, wondering if that person ever truly existed. In a moment of absolute weakness and despair, I told the kids. I sat them down on my old bed and told them that Mommy didn't want to be a family anymore, that she wanted to be with other men, and that we were getting divorced. Briar cried herself to sleep in my arms, her small body racked with sobs. Milo just went silent, his face a frozen mask of confusion and hurt. Thank God my parents were there. I was an absolute mess, a ghost barely able to function through the grief. I knew I would never go back to her. The level of disrespect, the sheer callousness of her behavior. It was a line from which there was no return. But the questions haunted my sleepless nights. Why did she think she could demand anything? Was she mentally ill? Had she always been this person, hiding beneath the surface? Or did her new friends truly have the power to change her so completely? A few nights later, I hit rock bottom. My father found me on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., hugging my knees and rocking back and forth like a child. I've been obsessively reading through Kayla's chat logs, a form of self-torture I couldn't seem to stop, until I saw something that finally broke me completely. She was describing our children, our beautiful, innocent children, as burdens. She told her friends they were holding her back, preventing her from being a successful woman living up to her full potential. She called motherhood a patriarchal trap designed to keep women submissive. What shattered me wasn't just the cruelty of the words, but the complete lack of any specific examples. It was all just empty, political jargon. In reality, I had never stopped her from doing a single thing. I paid for everything. Her part-time job brought in a minimal wage that couldn't support anyone. I'd backed every hobby, every dream, every half-finished community college class she'd ever signed up for. I was the primary caregiver half the time, so she could have her me time. If that was oppression, then I didn't know what the word meant. I must have passed out from emotional exhaustion because the next thing I knew, I woke up in my bed. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. I stumbled into the kitchen to find my 3 best friends standing there with my dad. JR, Jack, and Caleb. My guys. They'd been there since kindergarten, through every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every celebration. Jar, an ex-military guy who'd lost his arm below the elbow in Afghanistan, looked at me with an understanding that cut right through the noise in my head. He told me about his own experience, how his wife had left him during his recovery, unable to handle the new him. He arranged a Zoom call with his counselor, a gruff but kind man who explained that part of my identity was tied to my marriage, to my role as a husband. That part is now dead, he'd said, and like an amputee experiences phantom pain, you're feeling the pain from the dead part of your identity. JR put it more simply. The marriage you thought you had is gone, man. You're mourning it like a death because it is one. Jack, a quiet executive at a high-end security firm, had already been on the phone. He'd contacted the top-tier law firm his company kept on retainer. "They're your lawyers now," he said, handing me a piece of paper with a name and number. "Don't worry about the cost. Consider it payback for all the times you took a beating from me from bullies back in school. You protected me then. My turn now." And Caleb, a teacher with a heart of gold and, somehow, 7 children of his own, had taken charge of my kids. His oldest daughters were reading bedtime stories to Briar and Milo, giving them a sense of normalcy in the middle of our chaotic world. These men, my brothers, were rebuilding my foundation while I was still lying in the rubble. The next day started with a trip to the clinic for an STD screening. The results came back an hour later. Kayla had given me chlamydia. My self-pity, the grief that had been drowning me, instantly evaporated and was replaced by a white-hot, clarifying rage. The doctor's sympathetic look as he wrote the prescription for antibiotics only intensified my feeling of violation. The gloves were off. I was going for full custody, and I would leave her with nothing. My new lawyer, a shark named Marcus, tracked down the ex-husband of Sarah, the friend who had bragged about taking him for everything. The man's voice cracked over the phone as he told me his story, how she had left him homeless, living out of his car for months while she stayed in the house he'd paid for, telling their children their father didn't love them enough to provide a home. He was preparing me for war. Marcus suggested a preemptive restraining order, citing Kayla's increasingly negative and hostile comments about men. "It's for your son's sake," he'd argued. "Growing up with an openly anti-male parent is damaging." We were compiling everything. The chat logs, the video, her abandonment of the children, her unstable behavior, and her new, extreme ideology. A few days later, I had a scheduled Zoom call with Kayla. She hadn't reached out to me or the kids since the disastrous Christmas Eve visit. When her face appeared on my screen, I barely recognized her. She was dolled up, caked in makeup, wearing a low-cut top that seemed bizarrely inappropriate for a conversation about the dissolution of our marriage. I told her I was recording the conversation for my records. She just smirked. She spent the next 45 minutes trying to provoke me, trying to get a rise out of me. She made lewd comments about other men, her eyes darting off camera, as if she was talking to someone else in the room. I stayed calm, cool, just as Marcus had advised. "I'm not interested in your hobbies, Kayla," I said flatly. "I'm here to discuss the divorce and the arrangements for the children." Her frustration grew with my refusal to take the bait. She called me boring, pathetic, a litany of slurs. At one point, she muted her microphone to confer with her friends, not realizing her camera was still on. I watched, fascinated and horrified, as she cursed me out, her friends cheering her on. When it was clear we were getting nowhere, I ended it. "Okay, fine. A contested divorce it is. By the way, you gave me chlamydia. And unlike you, I haven't been sleeping with anyone else. You should probably get yourself to a clinic." She just frowned, as if she didn't believe me, then claimed I must have given it to her. I just laughed, sent the recording to Marcus, and ended the call. He called me back an hour later. "This is gold," he said. "Pure gold." Reading back on my post from that time, I can see how people thought I was being strong, how my anger made me seem defiant. The truth is, I was broken. I wished none of it had happened. I wished I could just turn back time and have my family back. Nobody wins in a situation like this. I lose. Kayla loses. And our kids, they lose the most. Their entire world was shattered, and it wasn't their fault. I couldn't sleep. When I did, nightmares of Kayla laughing with other men, of my children crying for their mother, would jolt me awake, drenched in a cold sweat. Then the hospital called. It was 2 weeks later. I was still listed as her emergency contact, and she was still on my health insurance. There had been an altercation. She had lost several teeth, her jaw was broken in 2 places, and she was being kept for observation. When I arrived with her parents, we learned the truth. Some of her new friends had beaten her severely. Word had gotten out that my lawyer had copies of the chat logs, specifically the ones where Sarah bragged about destroying her ex-husband. They assumed Kayla had been the one to leak them. So the very people who had encouraged her betrayal had turned on her with shocking violence. The irony was bitter. I found out later that she still had no idea I was monitoring her phone. There's a part of me, a stupid, stubborn part, that still wanted to protect her. 11 years of love don't just vanish overnight. But she was a danger to herself and, more importantly, to my children. She asked if she could move back home, her voice a muffled, painful whisper through her wired jaw. "No way in hell," I told her. Her parents offered to let her live with them, but under strict conditions. No phone, no visitors, mandatory counseling. For the first time, in the sterile, quiet hospital room, I saw a flicker of something that might have been regret in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, not looking at me. I ruined everything. But I didn't think it was genuine. It was the apology of someone who had been caught, not someone who was truly sorry for the pain she had caused. I still didn't understand. She had destroyed her family, her home, her entire life. For what? A cheap buzz and random sex with strangers? I decided to go completely no contact. I couldn't handle the craziness anymore. A month later, I was still a wreck. Depressed, exhausted, barely functioning. But the kids were doing better. My dad took us all skiing up at his cabin. Watching them laugh as they tumbled down the bunny slope, their faces flushed with excitement, I felt the first glimmer of hope in a long time. For a few brief moments, I could almost forget. I ended up speaking with one of Kayla's friends, the other woman who had been critically injured in the attack. Her own family had refused to see her. She was alone. I was worried the people who attacked Kayla might come after me and my kids, thinking I was the source of the leak, so I went to the hospital to talk to her. She opened our conversation by offering me sexual services for $20. Her eyes were vacant, her skin pale and bruised. I offered her $50 for information instead. What she told me was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. The entire feminist group was a front. They were hardcore drug addicts. Meth. Sarah, the ringleader, had brought Kayla into their circle and introduced her to the drug. They sold themselves for money to feed their habit, hiding behind their radical feminist rhetoric to protect their shattered egos. Kayla had bought into the ideology at first, but she quickly became addicted to the drugs. Eventually, she too began selling her body for a fix. Learning that the woman I had loved more than life itself, the mother of my children, had become a prostitute to fund a meth addiction. It didn't just break my heart. It atomized it. It explained everything. The personality change, the irrational anger, the complete disregard for anyone but herself, the desperate need for money from the divorce. Many people who had followed my story warned me that as Kayla's life continued to collapse, she might attempt to take her own life. They were right. While I was at the cabin with the kids, I received a text from her. It was a long, rambling suicide note. She confessed to the addiction, the prostitution, everything. I immediately called her father and shared her location from the monitoring app. He found her unconscious on a park bench, hypothermic and barely alive. He got her to the hospital just in time. Despite everything she had done, I didn't want her to die. I wanted her to heal, to become a healthier, sober version of herself, for our children's sake. They put her on methadone. Her father was appointed her legal guardian. She was scheduled to undergo a sedated detox at a long-term rehabilitation center. Thankfully, I hadn't canceled her life insurance yet, so her treatment was covered. I offered to help with any additional finances on the condition that she never be told I was involved. Meanwhile, Jack's friend, the ex-husband Sarah had destroyed, decided to handle the attackers himself. Brandon was an intimidating mountain of a man who looked like he could wrestle a bear. He paid the two men who had beaten Kayla a visit and gave them two options: go to the police and confess, or face him again. They were at the police station within the hour. I found a new apartment for me and the kids. Smaller, but it was ours. It was a fresh start. I was slowly decorating their rooms, trying to create a safe, welcoming space for them. Explaining Mommy's absence was easier now. Mommy is sick, I told them. It's an illness that makes her act differently, and it's going to take a very long time for her to get well. They wrote her letters, which I kept in a box, waiting for a day she might be stable enough to read them. I was still sad, still exhausted, but I was functional. I thought we were going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. That was my final update. I thought that would be the end of the story. I was wrong. The final update is this. Kayla passed away. She overdosed while in rehab. Nobody knows how she got the drugs. One doctor speculated she might have hidden them internally, and the bag burst during the detox process, releasing a fatal dose all at once. I had to sit my children down and tell them their mother was never coming back. I held them as they sobbed, their small bodies shaking with a grief so profound I couldn't soothe it. How do you explain that kind of permanence to a child? I have no answers. Only a deep, unending well of tears and the faces of my two beautiful children, who have lost more than anyone ever should. The woman I married is gone. The person she became is gone. All that's left is the wreckage. And us.